So we've reached the semifinals of the college football playoff, which I think is a good time to go back and look at how we got here. So we've gone through now the first round of the quarterfinals of the college football playoff. And one of the big talking points after the quarterfinals was the fact that every team who earned a bye didn't win. All four teams that got to sit out and watch for a week are not moving on to the semifinals. And there have been wild talking points since then that we have had the, it's not fair. There should be, and I think part of these are valid concerns, valid questions, and other ones are just kind of stupid. The idea that because the four teams that got the bye did not move on in the college football playoff means that there needs to be changes, that there needs to be reseeding, that maybe a conference championship doesn't deserve a bye, et cetera, whatever, I think is ridiculous. Because if you look at the four games that were played by the teams that earned byes, first of all, Boise State and Arizona State from the get-go were viewed as like, hey, these teams didn't deserve a bye. They are not worthy of the advantage that they were given. You then can't turn around and say, oh, it's a bad thing to earn a bye. It's a bad thing to win your conference championship. I wouldn't want that in the future. Well, no. If you're the teams that don't deserve to be at that stage, that didn't, in the overwhelming majority of college football fans, people in the sport, observers, etc., if you say, hey, they don't deserve to be there, you then don't get to go like, oh my gosh, I can't believe they lost. How in the hell did they do this? No. That's not how this works. You don't get to have it both ways. So there's two right out of the bat. Right off the bat, two of them are thrown out the window. And this was a popular talking point with SEC fans, was like, hey, these teams don't even deserve to be in the playoff, let alone have a bye. And then when they get the bye, you're like, oh my gosh. Hey, or when they lose after they got the bye, was like, man, it might be a bad thing to have won your conference championship. I've seen it already now that, like, well, Texas and Penn State have played an extra game, one more game than Ohio State and Notre Dame. That's not fair. Jeez, I'm criminy. Stop it. But those two teams losing, we can throw those out the window. They were big underdogs in both of those games. The fact that Arizona State pushed Texas to overtime should be viewed as like, hey, they did belong. They outperformed and outpaced what I think the expectations were from damn near everybody in the sport. So I'll throw those two right out the window. Then the SEC champ Georgia is playing a quarterback who's getting his first career start against one of, if not the best defenses still in the damn tournament. And Georgia was an underdog. They were an underdog. They did not win. They did not lose from a standpoint that they were a 14-point favorite. Notre Dame was favored to win the game. And I told you before the game, like, Notre Dame was going to beat Georgia. And I think I would have picked Notre Dame to beat Georgia if Carson Beck was still the quarterback. You know why? Because Notre Dame is better than Georgia. Just like Texas is better than Arizona State, just like Penn State is better than Boise State, and just like Ohio State is better than Oregon. That's what happened in those quarterfinal games. It wasn't some jinx. It wasn't some like, oh my gosh, it wasn't set up for these teams to be successful because they got the bye, because they played an extra game. None of those things are what happened. Notre Dame is better than Georgia at a lot of positions. Ohio State is better than Oregon at a lot of positions. Penn State is better than Boise State at every position other than running back. Texas is better than Arizona State at every position other than running back. That's what happened. The good teams won. I guess that the better teams won, and the teams who weren't as good lost. That's all that happened. That's the point of the sport. That's the point of the game, is to find out. The whole point of figuring out who is the champion is by playing it on the field. So there is no like conference championship game boogeyman that's hanging over. Like, that's not what happened. Ohio State is better than Oregon. I think Ohio State is the best team in the country. They have not played like the best team in the country for 14 games completely. And that's how you get question marks whether or not you're the best team in the country. Ohio State has the best roster in the country. And they put that on display in the Rose Bowl against Oregon. So despite Oregon beating them once before in a 1-point game, there was a controversy. I don't even want to get into the reasons for why Ohio State didn't win that game. They won. Oregon won a 1-point game at home. So the idea that they should be dramatic favorites or that they were the big shock, I don't think they were the big shock of the quarterfinals. I don't think there was a big shock of the quarterfinals. The favorites won and the underdogs lost. The teams that you probably said don't deserve a bye lost. You know why? Because they probably didn't deserve a bye. It's that simple. It's really easy on the surface to look at that and go like, oh, everybody that had a bye lost. We better change this up. No. It all boils down to the teams that were expected to win won. The teams that were better than the other teams won, and the teams that weren't as good now get to talk about how they had a really good season. That's it. That's all you should take away from the first 2 rounds of the college football playoff. I think anything more than that is a really quick jump to a conclusion that I think it's really early to start drawing gigantic conclusions from the first time we're doing this. And especially in a year where this is as close to 2007, where you had like South Florida and Rutgers in the top 5 in November, as you're going to get. This was a wild, crazy, wacky college football season. It was. There was not a whole lot normal about it. Because I would bet you, I would have bet you 10 times out of 10. 9 times out of 10 now, because we've now seen, Cincinnati make college football playoff, Boise State get a bye, that the group of 5 conference champion that is in the college football playoff, I'll bet you 9 times out of 10. We come back and look at this at 2034, if it's still a 12-team playoff, that Boise State might be the only group of 5 champion that gets a bye in the college football playoff the way it's constructed right now. It's just not likely to happen over and over and over again. So that makes things different, weird, and wacky. If Clemson was in the top 4, if Clemson got a bye, that means either Boise State or Arizona State doesn't get a bye. And you don't look at this as like, well, because Clemson, for the last 15 years or so, has been a blue blood of the sport. You don't look at that and go like, what the hell are we doing? Arizona State and Boise State are getting a bye. You're not doing that. It's just the way the cookie crumbled in the first year. And I think to try to make like some ridiculous determination of the future of the sport and it's the bastardization of, shut up. Just shut up. Things are crazy in 2024 in college football. That should be fun instead of like the genesis for everybody bitching about something. The teams that were better won. So now you have 4 teams. I would contend the best 4 teams in the college football playoff semifinals playing each other. That means 2 really good teams are going to play for the national championship. And when that's what your expectation should be, your expectation should be the best teams are playing for the national championship. Not the 4 most exclusive teams, not the 4 best brands, not the 4 teams who lost at the right time or the team that won this or that. It should be the best teams. And that's what we've got. And how you complain about that, I'll never know. that'll do it for today's episode of the Daily Huddle. Appreciate you making us a part of your day, however it is, wherever it is you're doing so. If you're watching on YouTube, hit the subscribe button. Make sure you're getting all the great college football content we're pumping out. If you're listening on the podcast feed, drop a 5-star review. It goes a long way in helping out the channel. I'll see you tomorrow for another episode of the Daily Huddle.